What's going on, everybody? It's your observant lineman here, Uche Nwaneri, and today we're going to talk about the controversy coming out of Michigan and Michigan State this past weekend in college football. It was a huge topic of discussion because of the violence that took place not during the game, not on the field, but after the game, with Michigan State actually jumping a Michigan football player in the tunnel after the game. A lot of chippiness, even with the coach himself from Michigan State. And it's something that's being really looked at very closely by the NCAA, by the media. We're going to talk about it here. And honestly, guys, I think I have a pretty unique perspective on this for a number of reasons. But before I get into that, make sure you hit that like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel, the observant lineman Uche Nwaneri, and hit that notification bell so you get notified each and every time I drop a video. Now, moving forward, I said I have a unique position, a unique perspective on this, and I do. And there are a couple of reasons why. One being that as a collegiate athlete, I played at Purdue University. I played in the Big Ten. I played against Michigan State numerous times. Played against Michigan numerous times. So I'm familiar with just the culture and the history of these teams. But also on top of that, Mel Tucker was an interim head coach in Jacksonville while I was a professional player in the NFL. So I do know Mel Tucker on a personal level. He was our defensive coordinator for a number of years in Jacksonville. He was interim head coach when Jack Del Rio was fired. So I was, a part of these Jaguar teams that was actually under Mel Tucker's tutelage at that time. One season as an interim head coach, and then a couple more seasons he was our defensive coordinator. So got to interact with him on a normal day-to-day basis. So I believe I can bring a little bit of perspective to this as we get into the details of what happened in the Big House in that game with Michigan and Michigan State. Now, obviously, tough game for Michigan State. They weren't able to, really compete with Michigan in that regard. And I'm sure that caused a ton of frustration because, as most people know who keep up with college football, Mel Tucker was signed to a pretty big head coaching contract. I think it was a 10-year, $100 million contract after leading Michigan State to some pretty successful seasons. They rewarded him by making him the long-term decision to lead the program into the future. Now, let's take a look at the actual video because I do believe that, we got to go through these things and we have to kind of play it out, see how things kind of unfolded. And it's not pretty for Michigan State, I can tell you that. It's really not pretty. This video here, 12.3 million views. This really is not something that you want to be known as when you talk about your football program, whether it be professional, whether it be collegiate. And honestly, even in my days at Purdue, this was something that was kind of an unspoken truth about Michigan State. We had a nickname for Michigan State when I was at Purdue. The nickname was Penitentiary State University. There's a history of Michigan State having a number of players who lost their scholarships because of legal problems before getting to Michigan State, guys who were committed. There's some history of players in Michigan State, being kicked off of the team because of legal issues during their time at Michigan State. And then there is also a history of a lot of players out of Michigan State who've had issues, whether at the professional level or just in their post-football life, which, I'm not one to judge. I think that, things happen and people's lives can get changed in many different ways because of that. But as a university, as a football program, Michigan State has kind of been notorious for this kind of thing, for these kind of vibes coming from their program. And, I find it interesting that you have this video pop up, and we're going to take a look at it here in a second, where you have what seems to be, 10 or 11 guys from Michigan State pummeling and hitting a player from Michigan. And there's a couple of angles to this fight that we're going to take a look at. But let's go ahead and start up this video, and let's look at the situation as it unfolds immediately after the game. Wow. So that's one angle of the fight as it happened, as it occurred. You have a number of Michigan State players, punching, shoving, hitting. A number, I guess, is number one from Michigan. But also, there's another angle of this that you have to take a look at. There's a caption there that says the second player Harbaugh was referring to. Absolutely disgusting. So let's take a look at what happens here. Oh, wow. So you see here, that's a football helmet being swung. A football helmet being used as a weapon against another player. That's pretty dangerous, as we all know. We've seen these things happen every now and again in the football world, and it's never a good thing to see because this is absolutely dangerous. This is absolutely something that can cause serious injury or even death. I mean, those things are built to protect your head, your skull from being cracked when you're running at 20 miles an hour into another human being. What do you imagine that helmet can do to a head that has no protection over it? It can do a lot of damage. And that's a pretty disgusting thing to see. It is. It really is. It means there's a huge lack of discipline on that roster. There's a huge lack of self-control and poise on that roster. And at the end of the day, the responsibility falls on the leader of that roster. And there's one person who is undeniably the leader of that roster, and that's Mel Tucker. Now, looking at this, we're looking at these videos, we're seeing these things play out. And does it really speak to the character or to the culture of Michigan State? That's a question that a lot of people are asking right now. Well, we do have an individual who decided to make a statement on that himself, Mel Tucker. Today, just within the last 30 minutes to an hour, he's come out in a press conference and he's made a statement. But also, let's look at Mel Tucker himself, because as the leader of the program, you have to represent, you have to lead by example. And here we have a situation with Mel Tucker and a fan that itself is a little bit chippy. Itself is something that, there can be an argument made on both sides as to whether or not this is an appropriate response, especially with the situation with this being them right at the end of the game, walking off the field, and you have a fan reaching out to try and get their hands on Mel Tucker. And let's see Mel Tucker's response.
Now you have to punch. Now you have to punch. Now you have to punch.
Okay, so, very quick 3-second clip. You see this individual with the maroon jacket reach his arm out in front of Mel Tucker's face. Mel Tucker's response to that, apparently, is to swipe at that hand. Now, how do I feel about that as a player? I've been on fields before where you have, it's a terrible game, you have a bad loss, or you have a close loss, you have a frustrating loss, and you're walking off the field. Of course, fans are going to talk shit. They're gonna chit chat their mouths off and try and get you to respond to them verbally, which is fine. I think verbally responding is never something that is necessarily considered taboo, because you're not hurting anybody by responding to them. You're not hurting anybody by talking shit back to them. Now, physicality is a different situation. Now, in this situation here, as a coach, him being the head coach of the program, when you have people reaching at you like that, especially when you're playing against a bitter rival, one could expect to see things kind of become chippy. And I don't blame Mel Tucker in this situation for swiping that hand out of his face. I think that's kind of it's kind of bullshit for a fan to put their hand out there trying to actually intentionally interfere with his path to walk back to the locker room. And, of course, this is a guy who, in his mind state at the moment, is very frustrated, trying to think of what went wrong with their team's performance in that game. And he is definitely going to be hyper reactive to a situation like this. So I don't see this as a problem initially. So I wouldn't look at this and say, hey, Mel Tucker he's the one who provided the blueprint for them. He's being violent himself. No, I don't look at it like that. I look at this as a natural response in a situation, with all things being considered, in football, in the way that fans in today's age act towards players, coaches, and while they're leaving the field of play, while they're leaving the basketball court, while they're playing basketball, while they're playing football. Fans have become pretty bold, whether it's throwing water bottles, whether it's, talking about people's children. It's gotten pretty outside of the norms of shit talking when it comes to our professional sports. So, even with this being college football, I think that this is actually appropriate, and it's fair game for Mel Tucker to be mad and to swipe at somebody who's trying to impede his path to move towards the locker room, somebody who's trying to actually, interfere in his space. So I'm not mad at that. But let's take a look at the response from Mel Tucker in regards to this situation with Michigan State and the players that he's had to take action and suspend immediately because of their involvement in this.
First and foremost, Michigan State football is about integrity, discipline, unselfishness, toughness, and accountability. The incidents involving a small group of our players do not represent our culture.
Now, important sentence that he used, important term that he used there in his opening, couple of sentences in this statement, is that this group of players who were involved in this altercation, their actions do not represent our culture. Now, that's for everyone. Everyone can judge on their own whether or not they believe that or not. Like I said, as a Purdue football player, they were notorious for being a little too rough around the edges as football players and as a football program. But I will say that Mel Tucker has taken the right approach here in protecting the culture of his football team and trying to hold its integrity up over the actions of these players, because it's really the most important foundational part of creating a successful program. And you do not want to lose the culture that you already have in the locker room. If you lose the culture, you lose the team, and you'll soon enough be losing your job. So it's important that he made that statement first to say that this is not our culture. This is not what we have conditioned our players to be like. Again, whether you believe that or not, that's on you. But that is the correct way to actually approach this, I believe, if you're going to talk about in any way, if you're going to try and defend in any way the integrity of the football program, you must start with the culture of it. So I think that's a good way to start.
Second, I made a decision to suspend players based upon video evidence that was provided to me and our athletic director yesterday. The suspensions will allow the players to receive academic support and medical services, but they will not be able to attend any organized team activities, including meetings, practices, weight training, or games.
All right, so essentially, these guys have been suspended from all football-related, activities and appearances. Like, they are not, in the eyes of the football program, at this current moment, they're not football players. They're just students at the university. They'll be able to access tutors. They'll be able to access all the typical scholastic help that you would have as an athlete in that regard. But they're not part of the football team as of right now. They're suspended.
Our entire team will be cooperating with law enforcement and the Big Ten Conference to further evaluate the events in Ann Arbor. These suspensions will remain in place until the investigations are completed. When we have a full report, I will address further actions if needed. We're not here to make any excuses for the behaviors Saturday. They are unacceptable. It's also very important to say we honor the traditions of the Big Ten Conference including the Michigan State-Michigan rivalry game, and we have a responsibility to uphold the values of this great university.
All right, so that's the first part. Last part here, 30-something seconds long. Let's listen to it.
We are deeply sorry. We're deeply sorry to both universities, the conference, our fans, alumni, supporters, and of course, all of our student athletes, past and present. Out of respect for the integrity of the investigation, it would be irresponsible for me to comment further. We'll have more updates as we learn more.
Okay, so you have there Mel Tucker's statement in this news press conference regarding the situation with Michigan State and Michigan and Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the big house. Now, a couple of things that are important in what he said in both these videos that lead me to believe that he's not trying to dodge this. You look at a guy like Nick Saban, who on the other side of this had a situation with one of his players being involved with a physical altercation with, a female fan after their loss to Tennessee. And Nick Saban made a lot of excuses. He did a lot of buffering to kind of escape accountability and kind of protect his players from accountability. And to me, I've always felt like, for all the success that Alabama's had, they do lack a certain level of integrity from the program at its core. You learn a lot in these moments where there is controversy with the program. You learn a lot about what the head coach truly does stand for. And Nick Saban is about winning at all costs, and that does at times compromise the integrity of Alabama. Now here with Mel Tucker, you're having a pretty bad season at Michigan State this year. You were expected to be a contender for the Big Ten title and potentially to be a team that could go in to the college football playoffs. That's not happening right now. And to make matters worse, you have a number of players who have engaged in violent combat against a rival team's player, and not even fair at that, because it's about 10-on-1. And, you have to face that. You're the one that everyone will look to face that situation. So Mel Tucker says a couple of things that lead me to believe that he is invested in in upholding the integrity and improving the stance moving forward for Michigan State. He says he's not here to make any excuses. And that is of the utmost importance that you say that you make that known. You're not going to give an excuse for what happened, because there is no excuse for what happened. I have never seen that happen in my entire football career. I've never seen one team jump a player from another team. I've seen smack talk. I've seen chest bumping. I've seen finger pointing, but I've never seen one team try to fight physically in the tunnels against another team, and then on top of that, it only being one player and you taking advantage of that and jumping him in the tunnel. And on top of that, you actually swung a football helmet at his head, putting his life in danger. Expect there to be a civil suit coming from this kid and his family against the University of Michigan State, or Michigan State University, potentially, because you know how lawyers do, could be one against Michigan as well. Because there were a lot of people that were just standing around who had yellow M's on their attire, staff for Michigan, who did nothing, who stood there and watched this guy get beat. Now, I don't blame them necessarily, because you're dealing with guys who are football players in 30 pounds of armor on their bodies. What are you going to do to stop them from doing what they're doing if you're just this lowly field crew worker who happens to be in the tunnel after the game and you're witnessing this happen? How are you going to stop that? How are you going to protect these guys? Well, maybe it's not your job, but they're going to say, where were the police? Where was the security that is supposed to be in there to keep these players separated as they come off the field and go into their locker rooms after the game? None of that was present from what you can see in the video. So there's going to be a lot that the University of Michigan and Michigan State University have to answer for when this is all said and done. But, looking at this, it is the right thing to do to suspend the players that were involved. Now, we don't know that that was it. He's talking about one video that he's looked at, probably some security footage if there's cameras in those hallways that can show some of what happened. But there's going to be a little bit more of an investigation that goes on through the local police in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, who are going to look at this situation and try and piece together exactly who was involved. We don't know that there'll be charges. Generally in these situations, because of the nature of it in the football world, you don't always see charges come in these situations. But I won't write it off and say that it can't happen. I just don't think it's likely that police are going to pursue criminal charges per se against these players. Is it right? I don't know. I think that there should be some accountability from a criminal standpoint, depending on the severity of it. But it's a very touchy thing when you talk about these institutions, these programs. And when they have these kind of things happen, they prefer to handle it in-house, much like when you saw what happened with Golden State with Draymond Green and Jordan Poole. Could the police see that video and say, hey, that's assault, we're going to charge Draymond Green? Yes, they could. Do they? Not usually, because these things are usually handled in-house. And, there's probably going to be a little bit of a discussion as to whether or not that will be how this thing ends up going for Michigan State. But I would imagine that they're probably going to, the police are probably going to put out a report and say, this is what we think happened. And they're probably going to let the universities and the football programs take their own action in that regard, rather than them step in as police officers and step in as the criminal justice system and try and make that dictation on its own. I don't necessarily see that happening, but it's a possibility. It's something that could happen. It's something that could take place. We'll have to wait and see. But what do you guys think about this situation with Michigan State and Michigan? Do you think that the police should press charges for what happened with these Michigan State players jumping a single Michigan player in the tunnels? Should Mel Tucker be fined? Should he be suspended? Should there be sanctions from the NCAA in regards to this because of the actions of the players? Should they lose the ability to go to a bowl game this season because of that? Should they lose the ability to, have a X amount of scholarships next year because of that? There's a big ripple effect that can take place because of this situation itself. But I want to know what you guys think. So leave your comments down below, and definitely hit that like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the Observant Lineman, Uche Nwaneri. I appreciate you guys very much for checking this out. It was a longer video here, but I had to break down some things because I do have a little bit more personal connection to these events, or to the players in this event as it is. But I do appreciate y'all for checking me out, and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.